Welcome to my presentation. I'm Dan Sullivan, Research and Extension Soil Scientist with Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon. And today I'll be talking to you about challenges of managing nitrogen from manure, and specifically looking at ways to increase efficiency. So when we look at a manure application to supply nitrogen, one of the first things we need to know is what sort of a history our application site has had. We have quite a bit different levels of mineralization present on sites that have had what I'm calling a building history, where lots of manure, organic matter of other kinds has been applied. Some of that is stored in the soil and contributes to a higher mineralization rate. In contrast, if we've been taking off crop residues and not replacing organic matter, we may have depleted our nitrogen supply and have a lower equilibrium level. The tool I'm introducing today is contained in a publication called Estimating Plant Available Nitrogen from Manure. This is a spreadsheet model that's been incorporated into Adobe PDF, and it looks at two pools of nitrogen: ammonium nitrogen retained at application and organic nitrogen mineralized in years following application. The advantages of this is that different types of manure have different proportions of ammonium and organic, and so we can customize the application rate depending on the technology we use to retain ammonium nitrogen and planning to include the organic nitrogen mineralization. So ammonium nitrogen is, the time frame for that is within a week of application. We have different values. Organic nitrogen depends on how much is mineralized, depends on how long it's been since a given application. So this generally decreases with time. An example of some of the output from the worksheet. So I'm not showing you the input, but in this case, a total amount of nitrogen, 200 pounds per acre, was supplied. The worksheet predicts, based on the nitrogen analysis of the manure, that 98 pounds per acre are plant available. We have some economics here. So that's worth $49 in fertilizer nitrogen replacement value. Down below, we also look at ammonium nitrogen lost and its value. So we're losing about $27 per acre of nitrogen to the atmosphere, and we're storing about 48 pounds per acre. This stored nitrogen will be available to future crops, but it's not plant available during the first year. So there are two tables, one for ammonium nitrogen and one for organic nitrogen, that make up the worksheet. As you go across the columns, you'll see that each column pertains to a different kind of manure. I've got the red boxes around lagoon water and thick slurry to show you that there are some substantial differences in type of manure in what's predicted for how much of the ammonium nitrogen will be retained. Most of this difference has to do with the contact between the manure and the soil. A liquid like lagoon water infiltrates the soil, whereas a thick slurry mainly remains on the surface or on the vegetation, and so is more subject to ammonium loss. Down below are directed application methods that I'll talk about later, but these are basically ways to increase nitrogen utilization efficiency by putting the manure in contact with the soil. So directed applications. These are techniques that are applicable to perennial grasses and other perennial crops. You have an applicator that's capable of putting manure in contact with soil. This increases the amount of ammonium nitrogen retained at application, provides some other benefits in terms of reducing odor and not contaminating the forage. So it generally provides both an agronomic and environmental benefit. So this is important because farmers are more likely to adopt a strategy that provides economic benefits. So directed application methods are shown here. At the top, we have the broadcast method, which is not a directed application method. It's kind of the status quo. With the broadcast method, manure is applied and it covers the whole surface, including any vegetation that might be present. If we're using directed application, we might use technique B or C down below here. And that would be using a applicator like a flexible hose or a trailing shoe. So those application methods, the trailing shoe and the surface band applications, are shown in this slide. And they're contrasted with what happens if we broadcast and leave manure on the soil surface. So we predict from this comparison that 30% more of the ammonium will be retained using slurry applied by one of these directed application methods. The organic nitrogen fraction is the part that is the most difficult to deal with because we have a big time element. And so what we see now is the product of what's gone on in the past, and we don't always understand that as well as we could. This gives an illustration of kind of how it works, that in any manure or other organic input, we have an available fraction, which is the sum of the ammonium that's present initially, plus the mineralization of organic nitrogen during the first year. As we go along in time, we get continued mineralization of nitrogen from what was applied in previous years. So you can see by the time we get to year 5 that the available fraction, which is in the blue, is the sum of what is available this year plus what is mineralized in the 4 previous years. So in our tool, we have a lookup table for organic nitrogen. And this, here the different kinds of manure are in the far left column. The mineralization rate of how much of the organic nitrogen is mineralized for year 1 is in organic N applied this year. Go to the right and you get the mineralization series, or the amount mineralized by year. So if we look at this mineralization data, but in a graphical format, we get a graph like this for cumulative plant available nitrogen as a fraction of organic nitrogen input. So this is one of the most important things in long-term nitrogen management planning is we need to account for history. And this mineralization series idea is a representation of history. And so when we get out to about 10 years or so, then we're getting very close to equilibrium kind of a situation where if we keep the rate of application constant, what is mineralizing is almost equal to what we're putting on each year. So what is the consequence of not looking at organic nitrogen mineralization over the long term? So this, I've chosen a research example where we're looking at a multi-year study, years going along the x-axis, and the amount of residual nitrate nitrogen left behind in the soil in the fall. For us, that's September and the first part of October in Western Oregon. And 3 rates of municipal biosolids. Guess I just have the medium and the high in this particular graph. Anyhow, what you see is that even at a high application rate, we don't have a lot of residual nitrate nitrogen during the first 2 years. But after about year 4, we start to see substantial residual nitrate with the high application rate, which is the consequence of having a mineralized component from the previous years. So what we found in Western Oregon is that post-harvest nitrate testing can be a useful way to look at the fit between how much nitrogen is going on and how much the crop uses and what is left over and is therefore available for leaching. So this graph shows the soil nitrate nitrogen concentration for samples taken in the fall post-harvest by depth. So each bar here is a field. The green is what we see in the top foot, gray is the second foot, and the white is the third foot. So you can see that we find some farms that have very low residual nitrate nitrogen with acceptable yields. We also find fields that have very high nitrate nitrogen with acceptable yields. So this kind of information would be used as feedback to guide future applications. By the fall, we can't do anything about this year. This nitrogen you see here is going to leach, but we can kind of use this as an indicator of whether our system's in balance or not. So take-home messages. I think it's necessary to customize manure application based on ammonium and organic nitrogen analysis. You need to have reliable analyses. In many cases, you'll get the best results if you use a rolling average over several years because variability exists. Maintain active crop growth whenever possible. One way to do this, if you're growing corn, is to consider a relay seeding of winter cereal into the corn. The relay crop is already planted when you harvest the corn. It grows in the fall somewhat, but it really takes off in the spring. And the good thing about it from a win-win standpoint is that that spring cover crop can be fed to the cows and provide a source of income that compensates for the extra trouble of growing a cover crop. I recommend considering using the directed application technology if you're applying manure slurries to perennial grass. You can really save some nitrogen there and probably get better utilization because you're not spraying manure directly on the grass. In terms of the biggest thing that people don't do now that should be considered more strongly is to plan for the long term. Manure is a wonderful fertilizer, but it has this long-term mineralization effect that you need to plan for. So with that, I'll let you have a look at how to contact me, either by email or I have a website. Also have publications posted on ResearchGate if you want to look there. So let me know if I can help you, and I appreciate this opportunity.